You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real. As Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Future. All right, folks, let's talk about this story here. Herbert Washington, a former Major League Baseball player and McDonald's largest black franchisee in the United States at one point, is alleging the fast food company racially discriminated against him. He claims the food chain forced him to operate low-volume restaurants in black neighborhoods and downsize his store base years later after grading his locations unfairly. Washington filed a lawsuit against McDonald's in Ohio federal court today. He says once he started standing up for himself and other black franchisees, McDonald's began dismantling his life's work, forcing him to sell his stores to white operators. However, McDonald's put out a statement saying that Washington was facing business challenges and the company had asked him numerous times to address those issues. This is not the first lawsuit. There have been several other African Americans who have filed a lawsuit against McDonald's alleging the targeting of black franchisees. We covered that before on this show. Bree, this is significant because when we think about franchisees, McDonald's has been perceived as being the model company for African Americans being able to be franchisees, being able to build wealth, being able to own multiple stores. I've actually spoken to the black McDonald's franchisees, a keynote of the last 2 years. I spoke to them before. I know many of them have spent time with them at Essence Festival as well. But more and more have been coming out talking about this very issue. And we've also seen a lot of this happen since McDonald's forced out black CEO Don Thompson. There also have been people alleging that since Thompson was forced out as CEO, he only served in the role for 18 months, that there has been a significant wiping out of black executives in McDonald's. And so you have all of those things that have been going forward. African Americans have operated as significant supporters of McDonald's franchisees in terms of as customers. When you look at also in terms of what they do with advertising as well. And so this lawsuit and other lawsuits certainly is critical to understanding the relationship between African-American entrepreneurs and these major corporations.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's like you said, it is from top to bottom. I'm sure y'all are aware you had a lot of fast food workers going on strike today over the issue of wages. In many of our communities, people really rely on these franchises as a source of employment, and because of the lack of access to other food sources, it's something we rely on as a source of, cheap, accessible food. So you can't separate the economic issues from the racial issues. I mean, of course, that's the case in everything, but particularly in this fast food industry, right? And so again, this is another instance where I support the black franchise owners bringing lawsuits because we have to bring this stuff to the forefront. There continues to be all of this denial about structural racism. We know structural racism is real. We know structural racism is a thing. The gaslighting around it, the constant denial of it, the claims that, an industry remains predominantly white, or the ways that we see the, unequal distribution of wealth and money as though this is something that just happens by chance and is not something that is structural, that is thought out. It's completely false. So we know that. If we had an industry that was structured in a more equitable manner, not only would you have more black franchise owners who were, seeing equal returns, we would see it as a more stable source of income for the people who work there. A lot of employees in these fast food chains, they are black women. They are people who are trying to support families on low wages, and all of that comes from the top down in terms of how the business is structured. So we have to take on these corporate fights. We have to start fighting these unequal racist structures, and quite frankly, in every industry, but you've got to fight it in your industry wherever you're at.
Well, first of all, I mean, you're absolutely right. And I think one of the things that we have to understand, Quadricos, is when we talk about, first of all, go to my iPad, please. This is the website of the law firm that has been involved in this, is Piper Wolf. And you see the number of stories that have been posted with regards to this particular lawsuit. We're trying to pull the video up. A news conference was held today at 1:30 Eastern. I mean, this is important because what we're dealing with is we're dealing with, again, based upon the allegations, but not just with this franchisee and McDonald's. We're dealing with African Americans across this country being consistently locked out of the ability to create wealth. I've been talking about on this show this notion of where's our money and black economic justice. That America has no problem if we are talking about if we're talking about criminal justice reform, talking about mass incarceration. But whenever black folks start talking about the money, the whole attitude changes. Coretta Scott King said, when my husband started talking about the money, then it was a whole different view. When Patrice Lumumba was talking about the money and having independence in the Congo, the role the CIA played in having him disappear and Mobutu becoming the leader there. What we're talking about is the money. And so we're talking about on the federal level, the lack of access to contracts, the lack of access to capital. We talk about pension funds. Oh, VCs not loaning out money. Later on, we'll be talking to Don Dixon, her raising $1 million in a crowdfunding campaign. But the reality is the people who fund VCs are pension funds. That's the money of black and brown people. And so I just really believe that while we have folks who are on one hand, tomorrow there's going to be the hearing on Capitol Hill dealing with reparations. I'm talking about the money that's sitting there right now and how we should be moving on those dollars and challenging companies and challenging people to get these resources.
Roland, you're absolutely correct. It is fundamentally about the money. And if anything, to this conversation and to this point, there needs to be a mass boycott, not just against McDonald's, but for any corporation or industry that does not support black dollars, right? When you think about the Montgomery Improvement Association, what hurt, of course, was black folk not getting on those buses and putting our hard-earned money into the bus development authority in Montgomery. It's the same sort of situation here. If anything, the NAACP should sue McDonald's on behalf of the franchisees and the black community, ensuring that there's mass boycott.
But they can't. They don't have the standing. The difference here is these black franchisees. See, again, hold up now, Quadricos. The NAACP suing McDonald's on behalf of the black franchisees, they don't have standing. The franchisees are the ones who are saying, I was the one who was impacted. So that's why they're suing. Now, if you say the NAACP should be standing with them and joining them in demanding answers, first of all, from the press release that we had yesterday, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty of Ohio, Reverend Jesse Jackson Sr., and others were participating in the news conference. And again, we're going to be pulling the video, but that's really what the role is.
Right. So there needs to be a massive effort to boycott them, right? That's the point here.
No, actually, no. Because actually, to be perfectly honest, that's one of the biggest mistakes that black people make is we automatically go to the boycott, but we don't actually plan it. I talk about this all the time. When you look at Operation Breadbasket, well, no, follow me here. When I look at what King did with Operation Breadbasket, which he got from Reverend Leon Sullivan, what they did was boycott was the last thing they did. It was the other things they did up until that particular point. One of the mistakes that we do is we yell boycott, and we ain't planned for a boycott. So when we yell boycott and nobody boycotts, they say, hell, that's ineffective. So the next time we yell boycott, they can ignore it. We've got to actually walk people through, teach, educate, organize, mobilize. Then when the company is unwilling to then meet the demands that we lay out, then, as Dr. King said, we then practice economic withdrawal. They never open with economic withdrawal.
So to this conversation, I'm talking about economic withdrawal. I'm talking about economic boycott, pulling our dollars and our resources completely from McDonald's. And again, other corporations that do not support us and that continue to oppress us. And this, in my opinion, is not the focus should be upon. And you're right. If the NAACP is standing behind the black franchisees, then wonderful. But this is what needs to be the effort, because time and time again, we see a lack of economic movement that continuously hurts our community. And yet we're not educating our people about wealth, economic empowerment. We're not educating them about the harmful effects that McDonald's, of course, has done to our health. So all of this needs to be wrapped up into making sure, and I would also add, the black people that work for the McDonald's corporations needs to take some internal changes within themselves and look at how to make McDonald's more inclusive and bring in more people of color so that these systemic issues don't continue.
But Xavier, what they're doing is exactly, to me, the way you should do it. And that is, by the franchisees filing a lawsuit, you're actually shining a light on it. Then when you have your lawsuit, you have discovery. Then you go through these different things. Then you can take the depositions. You can ask those particular questions. You can compare whether or not what he's saying, you can compare the notes, whether what he's saying is correct. Was he forced to sell to white franchisees? I know another black McDonald's franchisee who said that that they allowed a white franchisee to open a store within a mile of him, taking significant dollars away from his particular store. I mean, those are the things that happen. All I'm simply saying is, and I got no problem with economic withdrawal, I'm saying that the mistake that we make is when we launch economic boycott campaigns and we have not prepped our people for it, so therefore it's then rendered ineffective.
Yeah, we can't sit and complain about the system, and then when we have the system in our advantage to be able to use it to be able to address systemic issues, don't use them. That we talked about this earlier in NCAA in a ACP case, and same things here. You as black franchisees, you want to be able to make sure there's discovery and maybe public information about what has happened that we've not heard of before. And this puts some signs of light on McDonald's. And with the threat of potentially losing business and potentially the threat of losing some sort of the public, you talked about this earlier, Roland, how people view McDonald's being the most socially active, every time you look up in our neighborhoods, there's McDonald's everywhere. There are bouncy houses. There are all these different things. And so putting that image at jeopardy with a structured process of how to handle getting information. And once you get past certain procedures in a legal case, then now you put on McDonald's to be able to make decisions. And so that is an avenue that must be used. The legal system is used by this society all the time to be able to box us out of opportunities, to be able to box us out of wealth. They must be used by us to be able to attain the wealth as well.
And the thing, Bree, and I have been talking about this in so many other areas, especially when it comes to government contracting, when it comes to private companies as well, is that there's an education process of walking people through to understand what's going on. I think it's very easy for people to respond quickly and emotionally when we see a particular story. But again, as someone who has studied Operation Breadbasket and studied how they did it and understood what the negotiations were and how they used their activism, King understood, because again, Reverend Leon Sullivan explained to him what their program was in Philadelphia, how they were able to achieve gains. And in reading Martin Depp's book, Operation Breadbasket, 1966-1971, what he said is, this is what he said. He said the greatest mistake they made wasn't in getting companies to sign MOUs. It was the follow-up and monitoring to make sure that they did. And so what happens is we have the news conference, we have the rally, we have the protest, then we have the negotiation, then we have the sit down of the announcement. But then when you come back and check a year or 2 or 3 years later, you realize a whole bunch of stuff wasn't being done. I'm saying, and if we go back to King's April 3rd, 1968 speech, where he talked about redistribute the pain, economic withdrawal, there was a clearly defined way of doing it. I think, unfortunately, what has happened in many cases, we've gotten away from that, and folks have just launched stuff and had no plan, no backup, no strategy, and it failed. And then our people are mad and frustrated by saying, well, damn, nothing changed.
Yeah, I completely agree. And I think that education is an essential part of it. And that's why, you know, as an organizer, one of the things that I'm constantly pushing, all organizers are pushing, is we have to study that movement history. Because a lot of times what we see is the highlight reel, and we're trying to kind of like copy, you know, what we have seen without understanding both what worked and what didn't work, right? Like where did things fall short? One of the key things about economic withdrawal is you have to have an alternative, right? So if, you know, for instance, you're boycotting the bus system, you've got to have an alternative around transportation. How are people getting to work? How are we protecting people as they're participating in the boycott? In the case of, you know, these fast food chains and especially a chain like McDonald's, what is the alternative for folks? You know, so not only is it about racial justice and economic justice, it's also about food justice. It's also about how a lot of these McDonald's exist in neighborhoods and places where people don't have, you know, an alternative place to go. You know, somebody mentioned the bouncy houses. I mean, this is a place where you can go and you can get an affordable meal. You know, the kids can play. So if we're boycotting, what is the alternative? So those are things that we have to think through. And then exactly to your point, Roland, like, you know, it's not just that we go through the motions of the boycott, but what are we changing in terms of the infrastructure on the other side of it? You know, so I would like to see a scenario where not only are we, you know, changing the corporate structure of McDonald's, but we're also looking at what are the other alternatives. Can we have some more, you know, Black-owned, you know, standalone restaurants in our community? Can we have some more nutritious options, or can we force McDonald's to provide some more nutritious options in our community? So that's kind of like the follow through that we have to do. A lot of times we kind of set the bar, quite frankly, kind of low, right? So you know, we want to, yes, we're going to go through this legal process and address the complaints of the Black franchise owners, right? But more broadly, how do we, through this process, address racial justice, economic justice, and food justice, and health justice in our communities, would be my question.
So absolutely right. And so we look to have Herb on this show to further talk about that. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
It's time to be smart. When we control our institutions, we win. This is the most important news show on television of any racial background. Y'all put $2, $3, $4, $5, $10, $15, $20, $30 on this and keep this going. What you've done, Roland, since this crisis came out in full bloom. Anybody watching this, tell your friends, go back and look at the last 2 weeks, especially of Roland Martin Unfiltered. I mean, hell, go back and look at the last 2 days. You've had sitting United States senators today, Klobuchar and Harris. Whatever you have that you can bring to Roland Martin Unfiltered to support it, please do, because this information may literally save your life.
Watch Roland Martin Unfiltered daily at 6 p.m. Eastern on YouTube, Facebook, or Periscope, or go to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered Daily Digital Show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. Our goal is to get 20,000 of our fans contributing $50 each for the whole year. You can make this possible. RolandMartinUnfiltered.com.